UNI is coming off 2 blowout wins at home. Now they're jumping on the road for the first time in a month to take on the Salukis of Southern Illinois. On to talk with us about the game and now on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com is Bucky Dent of the Southern Illinoisan. Bucky, let's talk about the game last week for SIU to start. Lost to previously 1-5 South Dakota. Stat-wise, for the most part, you'd guess Southern Illinois dominated that game. What happened?
But what happened was there was this kind of feeling. I don't know if you read my gamer or not from Vermilion, but there was this feeling I had throughout the day that even though Southern was dominating the first half, that they were going to be in some trouble because they missed some opportunities. They turned the ball over late in the first quarter and gave South Dakota a 6-yard field that it cashed in. And then after they took a 21-7 lead in the second quarter, SIU did the thing that Nick Hill always wants to do offensively. They gave up scores to end the first half and then to start the second half, a field goal to end the first half. And this, by the way, was with a backup quarterback after Bob Nielsen finally got Carson Camp out of there. He was struggling big time. They put in Aiden Bowman, the son of former NFL quarterback Todd Bowman, and he was very effective because he had a running game with him that maybe Camp didn't have. The big key to that game, in my opinion, Eliot, was that South Dakota had 2 backs over 100 yards. They were able to control the ball for the second half with the ground game. They did not put Bauman in a bunch of third and long situations where SIU's pass rush could tee off on them. And at the same time, South Dakota figured out a way to keep SIU's offense under wraps in the second half. On the last 5 drives of the game, SIU had just 50 yards total. So that kind of set up and put everything in motion where SIU blew a 2-touchdown lead on the road against a 1-5 team and ate a loss it really didn't need to eat at this stage of the season, which makes this game a whole lot more important for it than maybe vital, let's say, for it than maybe it was at this time a week ago.
Now, in regards to that quarterback change, do you think that that affected SIU in that they solely prepared for Carson Camp?
I'm sure it did to an extent because this kid hadn't played until Saturday. Nobody had any film on him. Nobody knew what his tendencies were, this, that, and the other. And I can tell you about him. He's a 6'5", 240-pound lefty. He kind of moves in a gangly fashion, but he's just mobile enough to get out of trouble. He's not going to gain a bunch of yardage, but he can move around and create time to throw. He throws a good ball. He throws good comeback routes and deep routes. So no one had time to prepare for him, obviously. I still say, though, the big thing was that South Dakota was able to run the ball in SIU in a way nobody, not even Northwestern, with Evan Hull, their one really good player on offense who had over 100 yards up in Evanston last month. South Dakota ran the ball on SIU in a way nobody has all year.
And referencing that, before we continue into the more bigger picture stuff, I mean, I see SIU ranks, I think what I saw is 11th in the FCS in run defense. And so what did USD do that made it so effective? Was it just they just dominated the line of scrimmage? Any injuries for SIU? What was going on there?
No injuries. I just think, well, one thing, I think USD had gotten some guys healthy up front. They maybe have had some injuries, and it's hurt their ability to run the ball. I like both the backs. They had Tice and Shamari Lawrence, just as they were described by Nick Hill last week, hard one-cut runners, and they lived up to that billing. I just think SIU had bad run fits in the second half, and South Dakota was able to take advantage of it and gain a rhythm offensively and was able to control the ball, the clock, and ultimately the game in the second half. I think that was the big thing. You know, SIU was 9th in the nation in run defense coming into that game, and even in the games they lost earlier in the year, it wasn't the run that was beating them. It was not being able to defend the pass. In this game, it was the running game that beat it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people were excited about SIU going into the season, and if there was a team to expose the pass issues on defense, it was Incarnate Word to start the year. That's a good football team.
Incarnate Word will expose a lot of people's pass defense. Lindsey Scott is a better thrower than people thought he was, to be honest with you.
Yep.
And his receivers. And the funny thing is, the best receiver Incarnate Word has is a former Valley kid. Taylor Grimes started at Illinois State. Really didn't have a lot of impact at ISU, but he goes to Incarnate Word, and he's an All-America guy all of a sudden. They've got speed in the outside. Their defense has improved over last year. They make plays behind the line of scrimmage. And I tell you what, if they get you down, there is absolutely no mercy. It's sweep the leg, Johnny, when it comes to Incarnate Word. And they swept the leg quite a bit down in San Antonio on that stormy summer night.
Bucky Dent joining us here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com on this Saturday morning. So prior to that game against South Dakota, SIU had won 5 games in a row after starting 0-2, including that 31-24 FBS win over Northwestern and a 34-17 win over North Dakota, who beat UNI in that second week of the season. What's been going right for the Salukis, or what went right for the Salukis over those 5 wins in a row?
Basically winning on first and second down on both sides of the football. Because they were able to get into good down and distance situations that made their offense very efficient, because they're able to get opponents into third and long defensively, they were able to crank up what's been a much improved pass rush. They have 29 sacks through 8 games. Richie Haggerty has become a force rushing the passer. They've picked good times to run cornerback and safety blitzes to create further pressure as well. And the pass defense has been a whole lot better since those first 2 games. Remember, SEMO beat them with something like 342 yards in the air in what was a very close game. And SIU still could have won were it not for a couple of very debatable PI calls in the end zone late in that game. But that's been the big thing. They've controlled first and second down on both sides of the ball. Their line has played very well of late. And they didn't run the ball that badly at South Dakota. They had 166 yards on the ground. Ramiro Eliot hit the century mark. So, I think that's been the key, winning first and second down on both sides of the football.
Obviously, those are the 2 big wins that I mentioned: the North Dakota and the Northwestern win. Obviously, that's what's going to improve the playoff resume for SIU. But how about these other victories over some lesser talented teams? I know they played Western Illinois recently, and Baker completed, I think it was 25 of 28 passes. So, do you think that the continued trend of success on first and second down and improved defense, do you think that might be a reflection of the opponents they've played more so, or has it been consistent, including those wins against Northwestern and North Dakota?
It's been pretty consistent across the board. You look at the Illinois State game, and Illinois State is a team that I believe has a sneaky chance of getting into the playoffs. They're 5-2 now. And that they won there might be a reflection of as much of getting away with one in a sense, because they almost blew a 19-0 lead, as it is the fact that Illinois State is apparently a better team than it was last year. Now, Illinois State maybe hasn't played the cream of the crop, but they did beat a South Dakota team that did beat SIU. So, when you play the competitive scores game, sometimes you run the risk of getting burned. And as Nick Hill has been fond of saying this year, every game is a 1-game season. So, I think we'll know more about Illinois State this week when they go up to Fargo. To be honest with you, I don't see them winning that game, but I see them making it a game. They're very good defensively. Their offense is getting a little bit better, it looks like. So I think it's been to answer your question completely, though, it's been a very consistent thing, winning first and second down, no matter the quality of the opponent during that 5-game winning streak.
Again, Bucky Dent from the Southern Illinoisan joining us here to preview the UNI versus Southern Illinois game happening today in Carbondale. So, in regards to, and obviously you just mentioned Illinois State, they beat UNI too in the Dome, 23. I believe it was 23-21 as the final score, and they went that sort of dink and dunk offense and just get a few chunk plays here.
Good way of describing it.
Yeah. And so in the film I've been able to watch, what it looks like to me from the offense for Southern Illinois is they just, want to keep opposing defenses guessing with the mixture of Javon Williams in that Wildcat and then Nick Baker at quarterback. And it's a few of those plays, those 5-6 yards plays at a time. Is that assessment correct? Would you agree with me on that?
It has been lately, and the reason for that is the way opponents have played them, particularly the last couple of weeks. Western Illinois and South Dakota have not let them beat them over the top. They wanted to keep the ball in front of them. And Nick Baker has grown into the type of quarterback where if you give him the deep shot, he's going to take it. But if you're going to play to defend the deep ball, he'll take all the short throws you want to give him, because he's got guys that can make plays after they get the ball in their hands. I mean, Ramiro Eliot has more moves than a chessboard. Javon Williams can moose you, overpower you, or as Greg Marshall once put it about a kid from Illinois State whose name escapes me, he can just beast you. You know, and both the Cox brothers, Avante and Deontay. Deontay's been the big story of the year. He hadn't caught a pass in a college game, basically hadn't played in a college game in 5 years, and he's been arguably their best receiver since the first game of the season. And him and Avante both have been big time threats on the outside. And with the fact they lost their second leading receiver before the year started to a hamstring that apparently is going to keep him out all year, Deontay's contribution has been huge. Now, Northern Iowa will catch SIU this week without Tice Daniel, a tight end who can stretch the field and go deep on seam routes over the middle. He's out with a shoulder injury. Jacob Garrett's a decent replacement, a good blocker, but he doesn't maybe possess the deep threat that Tice does. So that may be another reason why you've seen SIU maybe throw shorter passes the last few weeks than maybe they were earlier during this winning streak.
Right. And I think I saw a ranking. I think they were 102nd or 108th. One of those two is ringing a bell for yards per completion. Is that pretty indicative of what they've been doing too?
Yeah, I mean, when you throw short passes, you get short gains. I mean, not to sound simplistic about that, every once in a while they have the guys who can break a tackle and turn a 5 into a 15 or a 20 or whatever. In fact, in the North Dakota game, one of the touchdowns was a slant, probably a 5-yard slant over the middle to Deontay Cox. He turned into a 67-yard touchdown because he just split 2 defenders and just zoomed through them like they weren't even there. But they do take what the defense gives them. If you're gonna play press or whatever, they're capable of hitting deep shots. They showed that in the Missouri State game. They hit 2 or 3 deep balls in that game that helped turn that around. But they're just as willing to take that 4 and 5 yard underneath and bet on their receiver making that into a first down play.
So flipping it back to the UNI offense, SIU defense. When we're talking about the defense for SIU, the first thing that comes to mind is that rush defense, given that they are 11th in the country in that stat. And you mentioned the pass defense has drastically improved. If there's a way to beat this SIU team, particularly for the offensive side of the ball for UNI, which would it be? Is it emphasize the run, emphasize the pass, try to mix both? What are you seeing that would be most effective against the SIU defense?
I talked with Branson Combs for a feature I did for the Thursday paper. I talked with him after practice on Wednesday, and he thought going into this game that Northern Iowa will probably try to attack it the way it did last year when it won up in Cedar Falls, coming out, using the run game, trying to pound the ball between the tackles and establish a little bit of dominance up front. So they are prepared for that. They know of Theo Day's capabilities. Obviously, the stats don't lie. Everyone knows he can throw the ball really well. He's got good receivers, but you got a guy who scored 4 touchdowns last week in Dom Williams, I think. And, I think, even with spread offenses, the thing most teams are still looking to do first and foremost is establish the run, and that sets up your pass down the field. So I think the Salukis are kind of prepared for UNI to come in and try to run the ball and get going with that, get into a rhythm, and then be able to take shots off play action with Theo. So I think that's what you're going to see. I think they're prepared for UNI to come out and try to establish the ground game.
Not only that, but when you run the ball and run it successfully, you keep it away from that SIU offense and Javon Williams and Nick Baker. So that was definitely a talking point within this last game against Missouri State. But that's a different conversation. So as we wrap up here, Bucky, would you project that SIU gets it done this Saturday? Who wins? What's the score and why?
I think it's going to be a good game. I know SIU in past years has had trouble with UNI. The big thing for them is it's not in the dome, where most teams have a lot of trouble winning up in the dome in Cedar Falls, from what I understand. This is down here. The weather's going to be pretty nice Saturday, in case you're wondering. Upper 60s, cloudy, but not much chance of rain. So it should be a good form for everyone to be able to display their skills. I think it's going to be a 1-score game. I would guess SIU wins playing at home. They have a track record of bouncing back off some tough losses. Remember, before they won at Northwestern, they'd lost that heartbreaker to SEMO to drop to 0-2, and everyone was running around saying, what are they going to do now? This season's on the verge of disaster. So they found a way to win that and get a winning streak going. I think their attitude, just talking from a couple of players and Nick this week, I think they're in the right place mentally to come to bounce back and win what really is shaping up to be a very big game for both teams. I would guess we're going to see something along the lines of just I don't know, 27-24, 31-28, something in that neighborhood, because you got two good offense. It's going to be hard to hold both of them down. It could come down to a turnover here, someone making a kick there. I mean, just a little thing. I mean, that could really decide this game, because I think these teams are very evenly matched.
We will see. That game is at 2 p.m. on ESPN3. He is Bucky Dent at Writing Ump on Twitter, which is the perfect handle for what I see on your Twitter page here, Bucky. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see who comes out with the win.
Thank you for having me, Eliot. Good talking with you. See you up in Cedar Falls in January.